All right, good afternoon. I am Robert Doc Barham, and today we are talking with my good friend Benjamin Templeton Cooke. Ben's on the line with us from Los Angeles, California. And Ben, will you tell our friends a little bit about the work that you do and have been doing for the last 20 years?
Oh, my goodness. Are you sure they're going to have time for this?
I think we've got an hour. We will be fine.
An hour? 20 minutes? 20 years in 1 hour? That does not feel fair to anybody. I'll do my best.
All right.
Maybe I can do it in like 2 minutes.
Good.
Yeah. So, hi, Doc. I know you as Doc. Some people call you Robert.
Yeah.
Some people call you other names. We won't get into that now. I've been in public or media relations for, I think, like you said, about 20 years. And what that means is I work with various organizations, experts, authors, companies, startups, manufacturers, etc., to get their story out there in the news, in the media. It looks like arranging interviews. It looks like creating thought leadership. It looks like press releases. You name it. I've worked with just about every major news organization in the world. And I've even done some things with you back in the day.
Yeah, you did.
I think more and more, though, these days, and I've been gravitating away from being solely just a media relations expert or consultant, like I've been doing with my company, Cooke Communications, and I really began to embrace this concept of everything is storytelling. For years, for me, it was everything is sales. You're selling yourself no matter if you're in a pitch meeting with a client, if you're trying to get a journalist interested in a news hook that you're pitching, or if you're, trying to get decent service at a restaurant. I always felt like you wanted to win people over to your side on whatever it might be. And for that reason, I always gravitated to, and I think a lot of people do, this concept of everything is sales, right? I feel like I've evolved that in the past few years, mostly because I've ventured back into the world of feature filmmaking. And to me now, everything is storytelling, right? Whoever tells the best story gets the sale. Right? Whoever tells the best story gets the listener on a radio show, or gets a sale on a book, gets a box office theater ticket purchase, or sells their widget. I don't know. That's just me. What do you think about that concept?
Well, we've talked before a little bit about storytelling, and I know before we talked about storytelling, I think we talked about communication. The phrase was communication was everything. And I think there's something to be said for that, but it should also be contextualized. The idea is that, as I remember, things are always communicating in a dynamic universe, and they're communicating at all sorts of levels. So whether it's a physical level of communication or biological level of communication or electromagnetic, whatever it may be, or in the case of you and I right now, the verbal communication level, where there are words that we're using with syntax and grammar and vocal tonality and those sorts of things. And so within that larger context, you were just talking about storytelling, and storytelling being an effective way for sales to occur. I remember when I was much younger, I had a sales job, and prior to the sales job, I thought I had an aversion to sales. Do you ever run into I don't have an aversion to sales anymore now, but do you ever run into or have clients who have an aversion to sales or to selling? Or does that sound preposterous?
The answer is yes.
Yeah?
I have run into clients who have an aversion to sales, and it also sounds preposterous.
So it sounds preposterous. Why?
Mostly because I wanted to get you to laugh.
Okay.
But
That's not hard.
I don't think that I've had clients who are eager to or seemingly believe that they can divorce their personal story from that of their company or their brand, et cetera, as if it's not important. And it's interesting, almost every single time I've gone down a path of asking them questions about their story as it pertains to sort of an overall mission, let's say, for a startup company, et cetera, there's always something very relevant. People have an aversion to sales because I think when most people think of sales, they think of, Death of a Salesman or Glengarry Glen Ross. And, who wants those jobs? Nobody. So, and no offense to the tight salesman out there, but there's something, it rubs people the wrong way, right? Like, things should sell themselves, right? I shouldn't have to bring out the dog and pony to get my point across. It should be, people should just get it. Well, I think there's some truth in that too, but if they're just getting it, then you've sold them. You've just sold them much more efficiently. And I would say you've told a better story. But yeah, to answer your question, plenty of people have sort of rejected this notion of being salesmen. That's something that they do over at the used car lot, not on this thing where I'm trying to change the world.
So
anyway,
if someone has an aversion to sales, I'll give an example of my younger self. My aversion stemmed from what I'd say is a misbelief. So it was maybe an uninformed or undeveloped or immature understanding of what sales is. And I tended to think of it as something not very ethical and not necessarily truthful and overtly salesy in a not cheesy, but in a bad way or a negative way. And when I got some education and had some sales experience, what my takeaway or my understanding was that sales is a wonderful thing, and that if you genuinely have a service and or product that you believe in and that can make the life of the person or whomever the organization or whomever the recipient of the sales pitch is, then you're doing a good service. You can shorten their learning curve and provide them with quality services and products. And that may sound 101, but back then it was a bit of a revelation. And I was thinking more about sales, and this may sound silly, but it's true. When I was a kid, there became a thing in elementary school where somebody came in and started selling bubble gum. And you weren't supposed to really do it, but somebody started doing it, and then it became a thing. It became something of a trend in elementary school. And I remember wanting gum, and the kid who was my friend sold me on the bubble gum. And it made me it made me really happy to be able to get some bubble gum at school. Now nobody was breaking the law or anything like that, but it was really good to be able to get bubble gum at school, and particularly the kind of bubble gum that they had then, because I remember there were certain brands that were coming out, certain kinds of bubble gum that were new, and as a kid I wanted to try them. So he had a number of these different flavors.
Okay, you grew up in this other America with this magical bubble gum buffet that I am unfamiliar with.
I remember all of those kinds of bubble gums because there was, what was there? Dentine and Wrigley's and Juicy Fruit, and then later on the Freshen Up gum that came in, and Bubble Yum, and the list goes on.
And wait, so kids are bringing these into the school like they're selling stolen watches or something?
Yeah,
like,
they brought bubble gum in packs. Somebody would go to the store and buy 10, 15, 20 packs of gum and bring them into school, and then they'd charge you an inflated price, but you could get a piece of gum for something like a quarter. And of course, since it was a quarter back then, you'd make sure that you chewed it all day long to get your money's worth out of a piece of gum. So,
I mean, these
I never stuck gum under a desk or anything like that.
Here.
Yeah. Well, that was probably some of my early forays, along with delivering newspapers into sales. But it's funny because somewhere along the line of that, which I really believed in and I really enjoyed and was a lot of fun, I took on this misbelief that sales was not such a good thing. And I'm really happy when that changed. But I still believe that the best way to go about sales is with a strong moral and ethical compass and promoting the truth and the facts of the product, and not getting into hype. Because if it's good product, I mean, there are all sorts of products that I see every day, and they're not exploding off the shelves, but they are fantastic products that have changed my life. Services too.
And are these being sold to you by elementary school kids as well, or just the gum?
No sales from elementary school kids. But I'm thinking, I was thinking about when I had a lemonade stand and I sold lemonade. That was another one of my early business ventures. But I think I folded up shop.
I remember that. That was, last week?
I chose to move into the lawn mowing business. So I mowed lawns in my neighborhood.
Congratulations. Next week we'll look at getting you a paper route. Do people still,
I had the paper
routes?
What's that?
Are there still paper routes? Like, there's no newspapers anymore, right? There are, but they're, like, significantly diminished.
That's what they tell me. I still like non-digital newspaper. What?
Yeah, but as a publicist, I can tell you for sure, there's fewer options for just fewer stories being printed in the newspaper, fewer subscribers. And I think especially at the local market, that's gone away quite a bit.
Well, most of my news that I read these days, like whether it's the Washington Post or Wall Street Journal, San Francisco Chronicle, Los Angeles Times, what have you. Occasionally, I'll pick up a copy at the grocery store, often at the local library, because they still have the paper versions as far as I know. But most of my reading of the news is on a tablet or phone or something like that. It's digitally based. What I would like to ask you, though, about sales and storytelling and media relations is, what's the story behind you really making the decision to become a media relations person based upon your education? So your college education was what?
Very expensive. Actually, it wasn't. I went to a state university, and honestly, I had no idea what public relations was. Or I had no idea about this world, and I had moved out to Los Angeles many years ago and began working in the industry and sort of got offered this job at a boutique PR firm that was starting up, and I thought it was nuts. I'm like, you want me to call up this local news reporter about this guy? Aren't they busy doing the news? You know, like, who am I to call these folks and bother them about this potential story? But you know what? That's the industry. And that's, you know, journalists are used to it. They don't always like it. And that's what PR folks do. And it was quite fun in many ways to take a story from an idea and to see it end up, you know, sometimes in, you know, whether it's the New York Times or something like Good Morning America or a local television news segment, figuring out how to be a part of the news in a useful way can be quite rewarding. And I guess to connect the dots there, my background and you know, I went to school of film, and
was that actually the major? Was film?
Well, radio, television, film.
Radio, television, film. Okay.
We kind of studied all those mediums with a minor in psychology, and the emphasis for me was on film. Right, I was like the president of Film Society and making movies, and in PR, I kind of made this story connection that it was akin to producing a film or producing a story. Like, there was many similarities. You have a script that needs to be written. You need to cast the roles in the script. You need to sell the story to a outlet or a distributor. And you need to bring all the pieces together, the interviews. You need to schedule a camera guy if it's a news piece. You know, it's a much smaller story, but many similar elements to sort of the visual storytelling path that you might have if you were to, you know, create a movie or a television show. At least that's what I used to tell myself.
And now?
I say the same thing.
So the psychology was a minor. Did you continue to pursue psychology as well, or you got your degree?
Oh yeah. I mean, even with our many conversations throughout the years, the way the mind works and understanding that, I think, is critical in any line of work. Whether it's pop psychology, the classics, or you know, some of the things that you've introduced me to, like NLP or additional ways of thinking, I think are key in any form of communication. So I thought if I was going to get into the business of storytelling, I better understand how people work and how the human mind works. That was my thinking there as well.
Ben, with that said, we are going to take a very, very brief break. I hope that you'll hang in there and be back with us right after these messages. All right?
Me too.
Thanks.
Radio Fairfax, the go-to station for a truly unique and rewarding listening experience. Made by producers who want to share their love of music, talk, or ideas with you. Free of commercial corporate radio control. Radio Fairfax, your voice, your station.
Radio Fairfax, a service of Fairfax Public Access in Fairfax, Virginia.
All right. We are back with my friend and guest for today and co-host, Ben Cooke. Ben Cooke is a public relations expert, a media relations expert who's been working in the field for 20 years now. And Ben, I want to switch to something else. We were talking about sales, and you are involved in more than just public relations and media relations now as well, right?
Yeah, I've got multiple boulders I'm pushing up the hill.
Tell me about one of the boulders.
One of the boulders. Well, it's big and it's heavy, and I would say it was round, but I think if it was round, it'd be easier to push.
All right.
I in the past few years, I've gotten back into filmmaking, and I produced a feature film, which I can't talk a ton about because it's not out yet, and the other interested parties don't want me getting too deep into it. But we've only sort of recently finished it, and hopefully getting it out into the market soon. So stay tuned for that. I've also, in the pandemic, co-invented a product with my dad that's sort of a travel sleep aid that we're having some success with. And I guess, going back to the beginning and talking about the storytelling thing, I've spent the last number of years helping to tell other people's stories, and I've only recently started telling my own, which has been quite fun. Whether it's in product development and launch or movie making, but those are sort of my other boulders, and
so
yeah,
you're telling stories now, not just for other people. You're telling stories for yourself, and hopefully those stories will be stories that you tell to other people too. Right? In the film that you're making right now. So
if other people want to hear them.
And what is the film that you're making right now, or you've made?
It's a sci-fi thriller. Again, it's not out on the market yet, so I can't talk about it. But once it sort of most pieces fall into place, hopefully soon, we can dive into it a little bit more.
Okay. Can't tell me anything at all about it. It's a secret.
Well, mostly I don't remember what it's about.
It's that. So we give. Now you're making that film with another person, a good friend of yours, are you not?
Yeah, someone I've known for many years. He brought me in as a producer, and it's been a very challenging journey, but also quite fun to, shape a script, receive financing, go into production, film the thing, see it come to life, and then, be in post-production for sort of as long as we've had. All independent, which is a whole other set of challenges when you're producing a film independently, which basically is like, let's go make the movie and then hope that someone buys it. And we're on the hope that someone buys it stage right now. So, we're very hopeful about it. It's a very timely message. We've got a good cast, and we'll just have to see.
So when it comes time to sell the film, are you going to be involved in that process of media relations, public relations for your own film?
I will probably have a guiding hand. I've already done. If you were to go Google me right now, and like on Deadline.com, you would see our film from some pieces that I got done for it. Typically, the film distributor has their own people handling that. Now, I'll be involved as a filmmaker and a producer and owner of the property, and with my expertise in public relations, I will probably have a few things to say and hopefully some useful things regarding the strategy of how we market and publicize the film.
So what is the, in your opinion, let's go back to communication and storytelling, really what are the core things about story that you think really matter? For example, I remember reading Joseph Campbell's work about the hero's journey, the hero with 1,000 faces and those sorts of things, and folks have broken down that structure, that historical storytelling structure, depending upon the model that you see, anywhere from 8 steps or stages to about 12 steps or stages. And I know that there's a book by Vogler that uses the hero's journey story structure for, it's a template or a model by which to write your screenplay. So for you, is there a set of elements that are essential to storytelling beyond what you described before?
Well, I think when it comes to narrative storytelling, whether it's a film or a series, a book, etc., there's all kinds of things out there. You've mentioned many of them already that will tell you about the structure and archetypes and these sorts of things. There's no shortage of that. What I began gravitating to in the past few years is sort of an adaptation or repurposing of a theory that you introduced me to a number of years ago.
Uh-oh.
Here we go. And at some point, you're going to have to tell us who the hell you are and what you're doing here.
All right. We'll keep the spotlight on you for...
You introduced me to this concept of the triune brain.
Uh-oh.
You remember this?
I do. I'm trying to remember. My brain is trying to remember the doctor. I'm going to have to use my search. Triune brain.
Well, the theory breaks down like this. Our brain evolved in stages.
Dr. Paul McLean.
There you go. Thanks, Dr. McLean. Right. And correct me if I'm coloring outside the lines here, but the way I remember it is you have a triune, right? So there's 3 chunks of brain kind of assigned to different parts of the body in conjunction with how we've evolved throughout time. You've sort of got your quote-unquote lizard brain, which is kind of a disservice to lizards, but I think most people get this whole fight or flight concept, amygdala brainstem chunk of our mind that, may or may not have evolved first. And it has a very sort of deep-rooted connection with our digestive system, which is all rooted in survival. You've got, on top of that, what you might call your mammalian brain, which is attached to your heart. And this is a more expanded social function, right? Family structure, friendship, cooperation, all within this aspect of the mind. And then on the top of that, you've got your sort of human brain, right? Your sort of frontal cortex that takes all those, builds on top of those things and allows us to build rockets to the moon and make computers and build artificial intelligence that will eventually overthrow us. that kind of stuff.
Okay. I thought you were just about to riff into an old Terence McKenna speech. It sounded a bit like it.
No, you're the king of the quotes and the memorization. I couldn't tell you who wrote the last thing I read. I'm terrible with that.
So there's the triune brain has the 3 sections of the brain in that particular model. Gut brain is associated with one portion of the brain, heart association with another part of the brain, and then the highest brain function is associated with the neocortex and the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, essentially.
Which ones are we using right now?
None of them. If there's one connected to our rear ends, then that's probably no. But I mean, in all seriousness, I made this connection. I always thought that was an interesting way of looking at human development, first of all. And it was something you did introduce me to. And, your lungs are involved in all this, right? So, like, if you're taking short, shallow breaths, it's probably because you're stressed out or panicked, and it's primarily getting oxygen to your brainstem areas. And it's only through deep breath work that you can kind of relax and regain your full faculty. I mean, there's all kinds of sort of biological aspects to this. Okay, so what the heck does that have to do with storytelling? What are we talking about here?
Which part of the brain, the etheric brain, has to do with the psychic? Yours is fully operational, because that's what I was just thinking.
What that has to do with storytelling is, at least for me, is this. My favorite stories play with all of these aspects, okay?
Uh-huh.
We've got stakes. We've got something, some thrill, some type of anxiety almost, an eagerness, or something that's playing with our fight or flight. We've got characters and relationships in the story that we care about. They care about each other, and through the caring of each other, we care as well, right? That's the mammalian, heart-centered part of the brain. And then typically there's something else in the story that is maybe showing us something that we've never thought about before, or stimulating our intellect. And when those 3 things play in concert throughout a story, that is when I find myself the most satisfied by it.
I see.
You can even kind of go in and see like what types of movies, books, shows, whatever, play very well in 1 or even 2 areas, but maybe not a third.
Would you feel comfortable giving an example?
I would feel so comfortable.
All right. It
would make me feel.
So would there be just good gut brain
up
movie
in front of the fireplace? What's that?
Would there be just a good gut brain movie?
Gut brain. Yes. Your average slasher.
Okay, got it.
So if you think of, and I've enjoyed watching these movies throughout the years, right? But let's be honest, they're not winning Oscars. Not that that's also a thing that needs to happen anyway. But if you think of like your average Friday the 13th movie, right? It's all fear. It's all the fear of seeing something gross, these people getting killed. Sometimes you want them to because they're super annoying. But it's just all fight or flight, right? And you don't really care about the characters that much, do you? I mean, it's like, oh, can you even name me a character? Not really. A heart-centered one might be sort of, and I don't want to do any disservice here because a lot of these things people really enjoy and they should feel free to do so. But, if you think of sort of like your cable holiday movie, so-and-so from the big city comes back to celebrate Christmas in their hometown kind of thing, and runs into their high school love, and, the stakes couldn't be lower.
This isn't Grosse Pointe Blank.
No, there's stakes there because there's guns and shooting, right? There's like stakes in that one.
Yeah, there's a good Bic pen in the throat death scene too.
Yeah,
out by the
or
lockers.
Like see, stuck with you. The Downton Abbey movies, which my wife and I love watching, but we also jokingly say there was like a review of one of these movies where it was like, this movie had me at the back of my seat. You sit and you just are comforted by it. It's just a warm story. And then one that might be just like pure intellect could be just like a science documentary, right? It's just all learning about things that maybe you were unaware of before, but there's no narrative consequences. There's typically not a developing love story or character interaction. It's just information. And those can be great as well.
Okay.
But for me, when you combine them, those are often the most interesting. You're kind of playing with the full orchestra. It's a fuller sound and it's a fuller experience.
So
for me.
You're saying that that's the higher brain movie, right?
When all three of them, we've got a higher brain thing. I always use the movie The Arrival. Is it The Arrival or is it just Arrival? I always mess that up.
I think it's
one with Amy
Arrival.
Adams and Jeremy Renner that came out, 5 or 7 years ago. It's probably more like 10 because of the pandemic, but who knows what time is anymore, honestly. This movie fits this perfectly for me because it's very high stakes. There's an invasion. Countries are looking at using nukes. We're trying not to blow everything up and start an intergalactic war. There's these scientists, these linguistic scientists on the ground trying to figure out what these aliens are saying and their relationship with each other that we very much care about, and the flashbacks and that whole mechanism with Amy Adams and her daughter. You really want them to figure it out, and you really hope they are okay. And then this higher sort of cerebral aspect to me was, and I'm trying to think of how I can do this without us being a spoiler. Is it possible to spoil a movie that's been out for that long?
I don't think so.
Well, there's
I have to take issues with the whole spoiler thing. I was going to say I'm going to take issue with the spoiler idea.
Well, their journey in deciphering this language really spoke to the higher level thinking part of me. It's something I'd never thought of before that was intellectually stimulating. And all of those things made for a very compelling story, and what I would argue is one of the best original sci-fi films of the 21st century.
Really?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. I enjoyed The Arrival, or both of them.
Anyway, that was a lot. That was a lot of me talking about stuff.
So I know a little bit about you, something about you, and I'm going to throw this to you. It's not meant to be a curveball, and I'm not trying to be brainist here, but in martial arts, there is a reference to, and you correct me if I'm wrong, to something equivalent to, was it chakras or energy centers when they call them dantian? Is that right?
There's a whole sort of Eastern philosophy built all around that, yeah.
I think that the lower dantian correlates to the gut brain, the enteric nervous system, the second chakra, that sort of thing. And the heart brain correlates to the heart chakra, the anahata in yoga, and or the middle dantian, and then the upper brain function correlates, I think, the upper dantian correlates to, I think it's the third eye, but I can't remember. I know in acupuncture, I think at the top of the head, it's the 100, is it 100 points meeting place? Something like that. I wish I had been better prepared for this. But do you
We all do.
Do you do you actually, what do you think of that model, the dantians, and do you believe that there's something to it?
I would say I'm agnostic towards it. I don't discount it. I think there is potentially something there. I'm just not entirely certain what it is. I guess with, studying psychology over the years, understanding how the brain, different parts of the brain work, is a little bit easier for me to come to in terms of its applicability. Getting into sort of energy centers of the body is a little bit sort of outside of my field of understanding. I've certainly read a lot about it and studied it considerably, but I would by no means consider myself an expert in it. Would you?
Would I consider you an expert in it?
Let me rephrase that. Would you consider yourself to be an expert in that?
No, I don't know that I would call myself an expert in it. I would say that similar to you, I've read a number of books about it, and my teacher out in Los Angeles, Master Joe, was someone who, whenever I was taking class with him, talked about the different dantians. So he pointed them out as we're doing the Qigong exercises or other forms. So and he had that distinct voice of his when he'd call out the lower, middle, or upper dantian. So he was somebody who I respected a great deal. He's no longer alive, unfortunately, but God bless him. But I felt like, given who he was an example of somebody who demonstrated perhaps the reality of those locations in the body and the power of them. But since we are relating everything we're talking about today to communication and storytelling, one of the things that comes to mind for me is, and I would like to share this, many years ago I was told about the Institute of Heart Math. And the Institute of Heart Math, when I went there and trained, I learned that they had been doing research on the heart and heart intelligence and heart energy. And I wondered, after going through that training and reading a number of books by the Institute of Heart Math, whether or not that was sufficient scientific research and information and evidence that really pointed to and correlated to the dantian at the heart. I think you know a little bit about heart math from our conversations, but the idea...
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, the idea that the heart generates an electromagnetic field that is actually larger than the upper brain, and that field gets larger when you are feeling positive emotions like love and compassion and kindness and those sorts of things, and that field, the form of the field, becomes more influential, so that if I'm feeling genuine love for my friend, genuine compassion, genuine kindness, or as the Buddhists refer to, loving kindness, that field can envelop my friend, and if he is in a bad mood, that the electromagnetic field generated by his heart would be smaller and not as well structured, and not as powerful, not as strong. And that through spending time next to one another, if I hold that place for him, that emotional place, that it will over time begin to influence him in a positive way. So bring him into more positive emotion. And there's so many examples in language, in communication, that seem to be indicative of what their research talks about. Things like I felt it in my heart, I know it in my heart, or times where I've sat with somebody who they didn't say a word to me, but there was something about sitting in their presence was sufficient to bring me out of a bad space. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
Totally makes sense. And similarly, people will say, I feel it in my gut, right?
Uh-huh.
There's like neurological tissue, and I believe the digestive system has just as many, if not more, neural endings. I could be way off base here, but there is a significant sort of neural aspects to the digestive system compared to the brain.
I know that also one of the things that I learned was that apparently there are pathways from the heart to the brain, the upper brain, the brain in the head, that influence the brain. Now, I know that the body that we have, your body, my body, everybody has their own body, that body is incredibly interconnected throughout.
Yeah.
So it's influencing itself all the time, every moment of your existence. But what I found
interesting you bring it up, Doc, because in college, my thesis film was called Influence.
Oh.
And it was a sort of slice of life thing that explored a guy who received some bad news in the mail, goes to a coffee shop, and his proximity to a couple who are sitting having a conversation sort of rubs off, right? In kind of the way you're talking about. And his sort of negative vibes and his anxiety tilt the conversation of the couple next to him sitting at a table enjoying a coffee in a sort of a bad way. And the idea was that yes, we influence those around us with our internal states, whether we know it or not.
Yeah, I think that the study of influence in body language is fascinating. And when I was learning about influence and persuasion in the sense of heart math and that seems like an ethical, moral way of influencing someone, right? Loving someone seems like it is a moral and ethical, noble way to influence somebody, as opposed to traumatizing someone.
We skipped a whole chunk of all this because you were asking me about my career and my journey, and I didn't ask you about yours. I mean, you haven't told everyone about yours, and I think that's a kind of critical component for all of this.
All right. Well, before we do that, what I would like to do is cut away for another brief break. You ready for that? Okay. We're talking with Ben Cooke today here. Ben is my co-host, and Ben is telling us about Ben Cooke and all things in his life having to do with communication and storytelling and filmmaking and public relations and media relations. And we will be back in just a moment.
Want to share your love of metal music to the world? You can do that here. Want to inform the community on political issues facing the public today? Well, you can do that here too. Radio Fairfax can be your place to share your passion with everyone. Radio Fairfax, your station, your voice. You are listening to Radio Fairfax, Fairfax, Virginia's free-form, non-commercial cable and internet station.
All right, we are back. I'm Robert Doc Barham. My friends call me Doc. I hope you will too. And we're here with my good friend Ben Cooke, who has been involved. Thanks, Ben. Been involved in media relations and public relations for more than 2 decades as a professional. And we have been talking about, well, what are we doing here? Today we're talking about communication and sales and storytelling in all sorts of different contexts, all sorts of different domains, ranging from energy to public relations to you name it. So, Ben, you were saying just before the break, we were talking about the various energy centers of the body, as they're called, the dantians in Taoist Chinese medicine, Taoist philosophy in Chinese medicine, and chakras in the yogic disciplines. And we brought up one other thing just before we went to break.
I did. I brought up you. The fact that you need to tell us who the hell you are.
All right.
Can I say that on this?
I'm handing the mic over to you. What would you like to know?
Robert Doc Barham,
Yes.
tell us about your journey in the last decades. It's been quite an interesting one. I know my friend Doc as a very funny fellow who has been on stage and on television many times, making people laugh with through his stand-up comedy. But I came to know you most directly through your work as a transformative executive coach.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And before you get into it, I just wanted to, again, thank you for that work that you did with me many years ago. I was a young founder of a company who still had some sort of, I would say, childish or naive ways at dealing with people, emotion, etc., particularly around being passive aggressive. I would say when I came to see you, that was probably my biggest weakness. And you literally coached me out of that mentality into a much better one. And I think in the first year that you and I worked together at that time, I ended up tripling the size of my business. So maybe you can just share with everybody, your journey from telling jokes to making people succeed. That's an interesting transition.
Thanks. I'm quiet because I'm touched by what you just said. When you and I met, very shortly after we met, I had the feeling that you were someone that not only was going to be a friend, but someone that I'd be able to work with in a business sense, and that those and more, and that we would be friends for a long time. That was my impression. You were a really likable, affable person and had a good sense of humor, and we seemed to get along well and seemed to share a lot of things in common. And I, as a coach, genuinely, sincerely had and still have a passion for working with people, for helping them to be their best. My dad was my coach when I was a little boy, and I was playing Little League Baseball at 7 years old, and he was the coach for the team, and I loved baseball. And so I paid attention to my dad's coaching. I watched in the dugout and during the games, and on the field during practice and during the games. I watched my dad. I watched what he said. I watched how the kids responded. And my dad he's no longer alive, but he had a lot of influence on me. And I honestly did not really fully realize, in my opinion, how great an influence he had on me in those things that I am passionate about, have been passionate about, and remain passionate about. One of those things is coaching. And another thing, and this ties into coaching, is it seems to me that for me, the purpose, or one of the major purposes of my life, is to try to be the best person that I can be. Whether I am whether reincarnation exists or not. I've got this one life to live, and this one life only. So what am I going to do with it? And I would like to be the best version of me that I can be. Coaching is very much, in my opinion, about doing that as a service with other people. As a coach, you want to be the best coach you can be in the process of helping someone change, grow, transform, and achieve what they would like to achieve. And I remember working with my father and watching my father work with other people, and it ended up inspiring me in such a way that later on I went on and became a sports coach in basketball. And then I also took a job as a counselor working with kids in K through 6. And I love that. And there's a certain kind of innocence in children that you feel like, boy, you're willing to do just about anything to help them through whatever they're going through and help them be their best. And so when I went to school, like you, what I'm saying is in college, I became really interested in the performing arts because and I'm going to make this leap here, my dad said that he had a great sense of humor and told jokes at the dinner table. And I paid attention to that, and I became a comedian, was interested in acting and performing arts and things like this, like radio and television and film. And all of those, as we've been talking about today, are forms and require forms of communication that require really quality communication. So I found as a stand-up comedian that when I wrote, the words I chose, the body language that I had, the way that I said things, the characters that I portrayed, the dialects, accents, those sorts of things were critical to the success or, quote, failure. The feedback I got was laughter or not, silence. And I enjoyed that so much because it related to something else that I think was instrumental in my life, and that was learning about that saying, know thyself. And I think that that is another major purpose of my life. Part of being my best is knowing myself. That is the route, one of the major routes by which to know to be my best. So, I am looking at our time, and I would really like to go on at length about it, but we only have less than a couple minutes now. And I'll say this, I'm happy to share more in our next episode coming up. And I want to thank you, Ben, for being my co-host today. And I believe that you and I are going to be doing an episode very shortly, and I'm looking forward to it next time. And we'll always be talking about what we're doing here.
Sounds good. Yeah, you got off the hook this time. Next time, we want the details.
You'll get it. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Robert Doc Barham. You've been listening to our wonderful friend Ben Cooke today. We will hopefully see and hear you all again here very soon. You take care. Bye-bye.
Radio Fairfax, the go-to station for a truly unique and rewarding listening experience. Made by producers who want to share their love of music, talk, or ideas with you. Free of commercial corporate radio control. Radio Fairfax, your voice, your station.